Okay, here we are in an ever busier and more confused and, shall we say, multi-layered conspiratorial world. And let's not even mention evil. We'll go there another time. Webster Tarpley is with us tonight this first hour. Lots on his table. What's up, Webster? How are you?
Good evening. I wanted to attempt a kind of a historical analysis. I think I can bring together two interesting themes.
Yeah,
one is Cloven Bundy, and the other one is Ukraine and Poland.
Well,
and places
that's quite
like
a stretch, but you can do it if anybody can. Let me just say that we did talk, you and I don't know if it was last month, it may have been, about the fact that Ukraine, other than the last century, the 20th century, was essentially kind of piecemeal here and there throughout history. It wasn't a solid bedrock country or nation as we know it. We did spend some time on that.
Oh, yes, we did. I think we went through the whole thing.
Yes, we did. You did a marvelous job.
I've just sent you that article.
I'm going to repost it. Yeah, I'll put it under your name.
I meant to send it to you before, but I just never got around to it. But this focused my mind.
Watch for it under Webster's name, Metaphysical Doubts Concerning the Existence of Modern Ukraine, a 1918 creation of the German General Staff. All right. Let's roll.
We went through that, right? We did the 1 million tons of grain, 400 million eggs, 50,000 tons of beef.
You did a marvelous job on it. It was fascinating.
And that's what it was. And again, if you want to read about that, you can read about that with John Wheeler Bennett, Sir John Wheeler Bennett, one of the main British intelligence historians between the wars. Wheeler Bennett is a key figure in the network that produced Kissinger. So this is highly official.
Yeah,
it's close to the heart of the British establishment. Put it that way. It's not really official. Yeah. And then you can also look at the famous Fritz Fischer, the German historian who, in many ways, the most controversial since 1945, who went back and tried to show an aggressive design on the part of Germany before 1914. And I would not accept what he says about that. I think that part is wrong. But what he has for sure in his book is a wealth of documentation on how the emergence of modern Ukraine was stage managed by the German General Staff, and that means Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg and General Erich Ludendorff. And Ludendorff, of course, is the guy who then launched Hitler. The two of them launched Lenin into Russia, and they also give you Ukraine. So it's a very strange group. We got to have to change gears historically a couple of times tonight, though, because I couldn't let this evening go by, since this is a very important anniversary tonight in terms of the Civil War sesquicentennial, the 150th anniversary, and that is. Maybe people remember, in early May 1st, May 2nd of 1864, Ulysses Grant had become the commander of all the Union armies, and he ordered everybody to go forward and attack. And that meant Sherman moving from Chattanooga to Atlanta. It meant poor Nathaniel Banks trying to attack Mobile and some other places he never got anywhere. Ben Butler trying to attack Richmond, and Franz Sigel and later Hunter trying to attack in the Shenandoah Valley. And those three little ones didn't work, but the two big ones did. And what we've just had, Monday and Tuesday of this week, were the 150th anniversary of the Battle of the Wilderness. And this was the first clash between Grant and Lee directly, and it took place in this thicket of underbrush and scrubby little hedges and trees just south of the Rappahannock-Rapidan rivers, a little bit west of Fredericksburg, Virginia. So it's the Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, Wilderness, and Spotsylvania battlefields. They're all pretty much in the same. It wasn't a Currier and Ives drawing, let's put it that way. Oh no! This was modern warfare, and before, within about a month, it looks just like World War I on the Western Front. But what you had then was 2 days of battle at Wilderness with heavy casualties. Right, 18,000 Union casualties, 12,000 Confederate. So 3-2. But of course, that was not the main point, that at that rate of loss, the Union was going to win the war because Lee had no way to replace these troops, whereas Grant had, huge manpower reserves. Although that was not Grant's strategy at all. He was attempting a war of maneuver, which he did carry through. But after the first 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, there was then a day of quiet. That's today, right? 150 years ago, today, May 7th, 1864. So there's no big fighting on the Wednesday, but then what happens is the Army of the Potomac, Grant, the Union, start to move out, and the soldiers are wondering, what are they going to do? Are they going to go back to Washington, to the forts, and take shelter there, or are they going to do something else? And you have to realize that under every other commander, under the typical McClellan or Burnside or Hooker or many others, they would have one big battle, and then they'd go back and go into winter quarters or go to camp and stay there for 2 or 3 months and refit and everything like that. And of course, this is not what modern warfare looks like, right? You don't take months off between battles. So there's this amazing moment, which is about 150 years ago, right now, practically to the hour, where what Grant is trying to do is to get from the Wilderness battlefield, which he's leaving behind. It's burning, among other things, horrendous scenes. And he's trying to get to Spotsylvania Courthouse, which is an intersection of some roads. And Grant figures if he can get to Spotsylvania Courthouse first, ahead of Lee and the Confederates, he will then be closer than Lee to Richmond. And instead of Grant having to attack Lee, Lee will have to attack Grant, and that would be the end of him, because this is the phase of warfare where the defensive has a tremendous advantage over the attacker, and Grant is forced to attack because he's looking at the November 1864 election, and he knows that unless Lincoln is reelected, you're not going to have a country, or you may have one, but it's going to be infected with slavery, and you may have another civil war before you know it. So look, here's the scene, and I just quote a couple of sentences from one of my favorite versions of this. This is Fletcher Pratt. Right? Was a naval historian and very interesting guy. So this is his short history of the Civil War. So he says, this is now the troops, these Union troops are doing a night march. Again, this is 150 years ago, right now, to the hour. So they're marching off, and where are they going to go? So at Chancellorsville House, right near the Wilderness Battlefield, there's a three-corner intersection. The road to the left led back across the Rappahannock to the Potomac, to Washington, out of the grim wood into fortifications, comfort, safety, food. The road on the right led past the rebel front, right, a certain risk, deeper than ever into the perilous and uncertain wilderness.
Uncertain. In other words, their guides didn't know where they were going exactly?
No, they know. You'll just bear with me. You'll get the idea.
Okay.
So as the Union troops come slogging along the road after 2 days of unbelievable hell, the dispirited soldiers dimly see in the torchlight a man in an old blue coat sitting on a horse at the crossroads with a cigar in his mouth. He silently motioned the guides of each regiment down the right-hand road. Grant. So he's saying, we're not going to go back to Washington. We're going to hold Lee in this iron grasp. We're going to prevent him from maneuvering, prevent him from doing anything.
That was Grant.
They stared a moment. The slanting lines of steel took the road to terror and death, upborne on an uncontrollable wave of cheering. That night the men were happy. They could never be beaten now. So this, in some ways, this is the psychological turning point in the Eastern Theater, where Grant shows that he's not going to let Lee push him around. He's going to hold Lee and prevent him from doing anything, and ultimately Lee is doomed because of the power of Grant's will, the perseverance of Grant.
That's almost metaphysical. Almost. Very. The scene you painted there was very interesting.
Yeah, it's very. I urge people to read it. It's again Fletcher Pratt, Short History of the Civil War, Ordeal by Fire, written in the 30s. There were lots of paperbacks in the 50s. That's where I came across it.
Wow, fascinating. All right, carry on.
Okay, so when there's no break, I thought we heard the music.
No, I did hear music, but I don't always pay attention.
Okay, so that's 150 years ago. Now, if you have a chance to go, I would certainly go if you're anywhere near this, because it now moves on to Spotsylvania. And here's what we have in Spotsylvania. The 17th of May, you have the first attack by black soldiers for the Union, right? United States colored troops. So there'll be a whole event marking that on the 17th of May. And on this coming Monday, the 12th, this is the day of the bloody angle. Because what Lee does is he builds this trench line. Again, it looks very much like World War I. And it's a salient. There's a point that sticks out in the middle. And the Union Army, Grant orders Corps Commander Hancock to attack this, and Hancock crushes this salient, and it means then Lee's army is divided into two parts. And this is now the second time in a couple of days Lee has to essentially get down to the battlefield himself and risk his life to try to lead a counterattack to take this fortification back. They can't do it. So what the Confederates do is they build a second line of trenches, and then they fall back to that. And in honor of this, You look this stuff up. The Park Service employees, right, the park rangers, are going to stand for 22 hours, and that is from 6 a.m. on May 12th to 4 a.m. on May 13th to mark the exact 150th anniversary of the Bloody Angle. Confederates call this the Mule Shoe, but please, the Bloody Angle at Spotsylvania. And that's a battle. Spotsylvania is already a battle that's much more modern. It goes on from May 8th to May 18th, right? You're getting into battles that go on for weeks and months, right? And remember, within 1 month of starting out, Grant has the siege of Petersburg going, which was not his goal. He would have been able to dispense with that, except his subordinates were not up to par. In other words, these poor guys in the Army of the Potomac had been demoralized by so much defeat over a number of years. Anyway, so it's essentially Wilderness, Spotsylvania, then you go to North Anna, Cold Harbor, and then by the first week of June, Petersburg. And there you have this trench system, which is exactly the same as World War I in many ways, in the Western Front.
Right.
So that's the sesquicentennial, and I find it amazing that this is not somehow more prominent.
My God, we've forgotten our history. Our nation no longer celebrates honors. We don't even take note of these things as a country anymore, Webster. It's tragic.
Well, here we did it. See, so we stand out, right? A little light in the gathering.
That's correct. Gloom. That's right. I agree.
But now look, here's what I wanted to try. I was struck by two phenomena that I think are actually linked. One is the amazing interest that a lot of, I think, very duped, confused people have in this Cloven Bundy story, right? That they see him as a hero, that they think this is a new revolution, they think this is some marvelous event, that he represents freedom and liberty. Oh my God. That, and when you look at this area of Western Ukraine, Lvov, places like this, right? Tarnopol, right? Where does this come from? Why are these people like this, right? Why should we have a center of fascism, Nazism, anti-Semitism, God knows what, in the Western Ukraine, right? What's the historical background of this, right? So what I wanted to point to was essentially this kind of a proposition. Suppose we had a world according to Cloven Bundy. We had a world in which you have essentially a bunch of rich landowners, ranchers, latifundists, whatever you want to call it, with a private army living on, a fairly large piece of ground, but with either no federal government, no central government, no authority above them, right? The sovereign individual, as they said, right? And it goes also back to this other case that the poor libertarians seem to be supporting Ed and Elaine Brown in New Hampshire, right? They thought these were also heroes, right? The Browns refused to pay their taxes, and they had crazy theories.
Okay.
And they're now sitting in
crazy
jail for
theories.
30
They're in jail.
they're in jail 30 to 40 years on the basis of their theory that the Vatican owns Britain, and I don't know what.
I know.
Crazy. But now we have Cloven, and this with Cloven, you have to realize how fragile. I know, but I want to say Cloven because I think he's diabolical.
I understand, but we should be respectful.
And no, I don't. No, I'm sorry. No.
Your choice.
That's for a salon. This is not a tea party. This is brutal. That guy's a fascist. That guy's the destruction of civilization,
First
as we've
Amendment.
known it. So I'm
You're
sorry.
covered.
This is where I draw the line.
Go
Normally
ahead.
I would agree, but not for this. So this character, right, Cloven Hoof, right, generally associated with the underworld. All right. So look, what does he want? The sovereign individual, the negation of the federal government. I don't spend a lot of time saying he's obviously a Mormon. If you want to see his Mormonism, this is a classical Mormon position, right? I don't accept the power of the U.S. federal government. Well, we pick up our copy of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America with Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion.
It's one of the strangest titles in history. Yeah. That Just Too Weird. Great title.
Just Too Weird.
Yeah.
And what you have in there is that Brigham Young wrote a Declaration of Secession from the United States in the late 1850s, and he was prepared to lead an armed rebellion, and he did lead an armed rebellion against the United States in the name of Mormonism and the separation of this state, Utah, Deseret, whatever he called it. Okay, but now we have Cloven. Cloven is a Mormon. He's not even a normal Mormon. He's a fundamentalist Mormon, as far as I can see. A FLDS, not even LDS, but FLDS. This does raise this question about polygamy, and I would simply throw that out. If anybody has any evidence about polygamy and related things, I think this is perhaps not so unlikely, given his belief structure. Right? But we now have checkpoints on American roads. And you can go to Slavyansk and you can go to Donetsk, and you'll find checkpoints of different forces. The Ukrainian army, I guess, being the bad guys, and the pro-Russians, from my point of view, being the good guys. But if you drive down to that pointy strip of southern Nevada, right near Lake Mead,
Clark County,
and it's a valley. What is it called? You must know all this stuff.
Well, there's Henderson, Nevada, is southeast of Las Vegas. I don't know which valley you mean, but
anyway, this place has the name of a valley. Anyway, the point is there are checkpoints. In other words, you can be driving along for your own purposes, right? You can be a tourist, and you're going to find some damn lunatic armed to the teeth saying, I want to know whether you're an outsider, I want to know whether you're a federal officer. And this is absolutely unacceptable. I mean, this has to end. This is where the power of the state must be exercised to shut those guys down.
Okay, some people are telling me that the feds, whoever you want to call them, however you want to call them, are not done with this by a long shot, and they're.
I don't think they are. You remember how they got the Browns, right? Eventually, these people will drop their guard, and then they're going to find themselves in a very difficult situation.
Well,
and frankly, this is the way it has to be. You cannot take up arms. You can't have snipers drawing a bead on federal officers and then getting away with that.
Well,
right?
we had vice versa too. Remember? And
but this is not the same. Look, let's just get right to the point. I'm going to tell you two stories, to the extent I can tonight.
Yeah, we got.
One is about the Holy Roman Empire.
Okay, I want
Holy Roman Empire.
Set the stage for these.
The Polish.
Go ahead. We got to pause, but set the stage.
Okay, go ahead. So tell me when the pause is. But this question of the monopoly of armed force by the government. This is the question of civilization, yes, or civilization, no. That's what it is.
That's a pretty big setup.
Listen to this. Here, we can read the obituary. Tell me when we run out of time.
Okay.
The Polish Commonwealth This is a huge state. It was the biggest country in Europe. And, big, powerful thing. It defeated the Turks in the late 1600s. And the problem that they have here, I'm reading R.R. Palmer, History of the Modern World, right? A good sort of 1950 era, not politically correct textbook. The monopoly of law and force, which is a characteristic of the modern state, failed to develop in Poland because they had government by huge landowners, each of whom had a private army. And these private army fight. Now, I know, if I say there should be the monopoly of law and force by the modern state, to a lot of people that sounds awful, doesn't it? Oh, my God, no, we don't want that. But the problem is, consider the alternatives. Let's consider the alternatives when we come back.
Okay, all right, we will do that. With Webster, as we continue in just a couple minutes on this Wednesday night. Back in a flash. Okay, back with historian par excellence. Never ceases to amaze me what this man knows. Webster Griffin Tarpley. Okay, Webster, go ahead.
What I'm trying to do is to go back to two countries that were destroyed by what we can call Cloven Bundy ideology or libertarian ideology, and I'm not kidding. You take a look at the map of Eastern Europe in as late as 1770, and you see two huge entities. All of Germany says Holy Roman Empire. And then, stretching from the Baltic all the way over to the Black Sea, almost, Republic of Poland, or sometimes it says Commonwealth of Poland. And there's also the Turkish Ottoman Empire, but let's forget about them. But within 40 years, both the Holy Roman Empire and the Republic of Poland disappeared, totally, gone, finished, kaput. And how did this come about? Well, it came about because there was no strong central power. The viable forms of a nation in Europe in the 1600s there were essentially two ways you could go. One was absolutism. Louis XIV, right, the Sun King. And this has gotten a bad press, but in reality, from the point of view of the average person living in a town, let's say, it's much better to be in France than to be in England. So the Sun King, Louis XIV, because the main thing you're trying to do is to prevent the endless private warfare and dueling and killing of the nobility. This is the main problem in the Middle Ages. You've got to stop the barons from fighting and killing each other for the purpose of getting what? Land, money, women, power, whatever it is.
What else is there, Webster? Summed it right up there, didn't you?
The English one or the Dutch one is that you can have a commercial oligarchy, and that can create also a fairly powerful centralized state. But now there are two examples of what will not work. One is the Holy Roman Empire, and it's the area of Germany, more or less, right? Germany and then some, because it includes Vienna and so forth. But you think of it as Germany plus some other nearby areas. The problem with this is there are 300 countries. 300. And in addition to 300 countries, right, of all sizes, right? Some of them are the size of a large farm. And then there are these countries which are essentially sovereign individuals, right? These are the so-called imperial knights. And if people have read any German literature, you may have heard of Götz von Berlichingen. He was one of the famous knights, Götz. And then there's also Ulrich von Hutten. I'm going to let you hear from him in a minute, right? He's a big guy around the time of Luther. Mm-hmm. And then there's also Sickingen. He led a revolt of these knights. And the idea with them is they are people who say, we are a power and a state in ourselves. They generally had about 100 acres, okay? They might have 20, 30, 40 peasants living on that, families, whatever they are. And they would say, we are subjected to no power except the Holy Roman Emperor. The problem with that was that the Holy Roman Emperor was far away, completely broke, no money, no standing army, no police force, no ability to enforce anything. So these characters led miserable existences. Let me just read you one of these. It's interesting. It might put this sovereign individual stuff a little bit into perspective. Now, this is this guy Ulrich von Hutten. He's a contemporary of Luther. So he's writing about 1500, and he's writing to a guy in a city, and he says, you people in the city, you have the advantage of law and order, and you can sleep at night, right? But we imperial knights, right, out here, we always have to be on alert. He says, if I put 1 foot out of my house, there is the risk that I will come across people with whom my allied prince, in other words, he basically said, I've got to turn to a local prince more powerful than me, because otherwise I can't, I got to ally. I can't stand up as one individual.
Sounds like
if
mafia
I put 1
families.
foot out of the house, I may come across people that have a feud with my prince, and then they're going to attack me and take me away as a prisoner and then ransom me.
Terrific.
So one false,
Terrific. Go ahead.
He says, if I'm unlucky, I could lose half of my possessions in one day. To get myself freed. So the protection I'm supposed to be getting from this prince is going to turn into a big liability.
It sounds like that mafia.
Yeah, but it's the world of Cloven Bundy and the Browns and these ideals, right? You can think of it also as Robinson Crusoe, right? In other words, by yourself alone, economically. But this is more like politically. Then he goes on to say, we have to keep our own horses, we have to buy weapons, we have to surround ourselves with a retinue of fighters. All of this costs a tremendous amount of money. We cannot leave 2 acres of land unguarded. We cannot visit a farm without being armed. When we go hunting and fishing, we have to wear armor because we can always be attacked because there is no law, right? This is the war of everybody against everybody else. So, and then he says, we have our own farmers fight among themselves, and farmers from other estates come and foreigners, right? The guys, from 2 miles away. And so he goes through what a wretched life it is to be a sovereign individual.
Right.
Think about this. And I would just point, my thesis is that the United States today is getting to look like this. Not only do we have people like Cloven or, Kukesh or these Browns, whatever they are, the people who believe in this stuff are, it's not a mass phenomenon, but it has a certain numerical consistency. And I'll even give you one idea in terms of the laws. In Germany now, with the 300 states of all sizes, and the 1,700 knights, right, the imperial knights, so each one of them is their own country. I am my own country, right? So they have to solve this religious question, right? Because some of them are Catholic and some of them are Protestant, some of them are Lutheran, some of them are Calvinist, right? All this other stuff. So we have a period of wars, and then in 1555 we have the Peace of Augsburg. And here we have this famous thing, cuius regio eius religio. Whose region it is can decide the religion. So if you own the region, if you're the ruler of the region, you can then turn around and set the religion. What does that sound like in terms of today's America? Big Supreme Court case a couple of weeks ago.
Wow, yeah.
Any idea?
Yeah, go ahead, tell them.
Hobby Lobby. This is Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby says, I own you. I can legislate morality for you.
This is all... Hobby Lobby.
Hobby
that's
Lobby
a story.
Is cuius regio eius religio.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Hold on. Hobby Lobby. Back in a minute. Hold on. Okay, Webster, and yours truly, and all of you good people. Okay, Webster, go ahead.
Now, let me just, I tried to say a few things about the Holy Roman Empire, i.e. Germany, right? And this is with the 300 states and the 1,700 independent individuals, right? Living this wretched life that Ulrich von Hutten tells us about, right? Anybody who wants to go for the sovereign individual stuff had better read The Life
you better
of
be
an
very,
Imperial
very
Knight
careful. Yeah.
by Ulrich von Hutten. And the Hobby Lobby, again, is that. In other words, if I can say, I can determine your morality because I pay you, that's a kind of neo-feudalism very similar to this, right? I can tell you if I have strictures, if I have conscientious scruples about vaccines or transfusions or organ transplants or life support or whatever it is, all these things that somehow cost money by some strange combination, right? Then I can dictate that to you. I can essentially dictate religion to my employees.
That's correct.
This stuff is too close for comfort. Now, let's go to Poland. This is even more extreme in some ways. The Polish Commonwealth is the biggest country in Europe, except for Russia, but it's the biggest that's all in Europe, okay? And this is the country where the landed aristocracy wins out more than any place else. It's partly because the cities are composed of Germans and Jews, so German and Yiddish are the language of the cities, and the landed oligarchs, they win everything else. And the cities have no rights. The cities have no political representation, because the only political power that counts is to be a nobleman. And in Poland, a very large number, 8%, 10%, maybe more, are members of this thing called the Szlachta. The Szlachta. This is Zbigniew Brzezinski, by the way, if you want to know what kind of people these were. So you have the Szlachta, who are, many, many thousands. But then among them, you've got about a dozen magnates, magnati. And these characters, the magnates, they are richer than many a duke in Germany, right? They're many a so-called independent state in Germany is inferior in money and even armed men to these Polish magnates. But here's what they do then. The government is the Polish Diet, the same, but it's the Polish Diet. And here's what they do. They have a regime where this diet meets every year or two, and they have a rule that if one oligarch, one magnate in particular, but really anybody at all, decides that they severely disagree with what's going on, they can stop it from happening. They can say, I will not allow this. And this is infamous, it's called the liberum veto, the free veto. And it simply means that any oligarch in an assembly of a couple of thousand can say, this has to stop. So it means that the measure under consideration is vetoed. Everything else that they've done, this veto could be cast on the last day of a 3-month session. If you get vetoed at the end, everything else is canceled. The entire 2 to 3 months of proceedings, canceled, rolled back, abrogated, nothing. And the diet is exploded, meaning go home, come back next year. It's unbelievable. We have statistics now. Between 1652 and 1764, there were 55 diets, and 48 were exploded with a liberum veto.
Huh.
Now, what does this sound like?
Is this a quiz?
It's the filibuster.
Well, of course it does.
This is the filibuster. This is what we have. Essentially, if I'm Koch, if I'm one of the Koch brothers, or Soros, same thing, I can decide such and such a measure is not going to go through. I may not be able to get something I want through.
Yeah.
But I can
So
block.
I'm going to throw a fit and block it.
I'm going to block it. So they can do that. So we're essentially at this point. Also this idea that the Senate, that they can put a hold on things and the rest of this stuff. It's looking very, very much like the Polish Diet. And when I say Polish Diet, for other countries, the words in German, Polnischer Reichstag, it basically means an ape theater, right? It means chaos. It means delirium, anarchist.
An ape theater.
An ape theater. Ein Affentheater. This is the German expression. But Polnischer Reichstag is what they would say about this. So the Polish, and here's the thing. Both in the Holy Roman Empire and in Poland, this was called liberty. You've seen Cloven Bundy getting on TV to talk about liberty. They talk about this as liberty. It's called the German liberties. What do the German liberties mean? The German liberties mean suspicion of outside powers, relentless localism and particularism, no taxation of nobles. There's no taxation of the nobles in Holy Roman Empire. There's no taxation of the nobles in Poland, I mean, this extends to other countries too, but in this case it's very strong. Here's what we find. Government became a fiasco. The monopoly of law and force, characteristic of the modern state, failed to develop in Poland. It did to some extent in Germany, but only in these tiny, tiny levels in many cases. The King of Poland had no army, no law courts, no officials, and no income. And I should also mention that the central government of both of these places, this was weakened because it was an elective monarchy in both cases.
Well, we hope the emperor at least had clothes, didn't he?
He did, but he would get them stripped off. He'd have to bargain them away in order to buy votes
good Lord.
To get elected. Now, here's the other thing. The filibuster, I think, is the liberum veto, right? And the Congress that we're living through right now, you could say it's an exploded diet because, they show up in this case, right? There's no reason not to show up. You can live the nice life, go to La Colline on Capitol Hill. But they're not doing anything. In other words, the House of Representatives, this Congress, has passed almost nothing. It's basically an exploded diet. But now here's the thing. Another part of the golden liberty of the Polish aristocracy was that if something happened that they didn't like and they couldn't stop it with a liberum veto, they were allowed the right of confederation. And that meant you could get some people together as a private army and wage war against the central power or against whoever was giving you a hard time. So instead of banning the private use of violence and armed forces, armed gangs, this Polish system exalted it. And the German system, in effect, did the same thing because of the tiny level of this stuff. So, again, I propose to you, Jeff, should there be a monopoly of law enforced by the state, right? This is the hallmark of the modern state. Poland didn't get it. Germany didn't get it. These countries ceased to exist. And when you say this stuff today, people think, oh, no, I think it's oppressive. But then consider the alternative. You look at Cloven Bundy. What would you rather do? Go and deal with the police department or deal with some lunatic armed to the teeth out there on the highway who thinks he's got the right to make you stop and show your papers? I thought these guys objected to show your papers, right? They're imitating all the oppressive features of the regime they claim to hate, and they're doing it, with no legal status, no checks and balances, no nothing. And this stuff leads to absolute chaos, right? Turbulent assemblies of warlike gentry. The great lords use the little lords for their own purposes. And here's the other thing then. The Polish Diet becomes the playground for foreigners. And in Poland it was like this. There was obviously a pro-Russian party. Sweden was a great power, so there was a pro-Swedish party. There was a pro-French party, right? Cardinal Richelieu made sure that there was a nice big French party in there. And then from time to time an Austrian party, a Prussian party, depends over the years, right? And if anybody came forward, as people did, right? There's a guy called Komarski, very important writer, and he says, look, we got to get rid of this liberum veto. We've got to have majority voting. We've got to be able to make decisions and take important measures because we're weak. We're a sitting duck, and they were. The foreigners, like the King of Prussia, would say, don't you dare pass that because I'm so concerned with liberty that I want you to have it. And, of course, what he was concerned about was he feared that if Poland could have an effective government, then he couldn't push them around as much as he did. So there's also another one where Catherine the Great says, look, you leave that liberum veto alone because I'm so devoted to it, right? And she got her ex-boyfriend installed as the king. So you begin to get the idea. Now, if we look at the U.S. Congress today, what would we say? Do we have foreign parties in the U.S. Congress? I rather think we do. I would say the ones that I would point to, first of all, the oldest and the biggest and the most powerful, obviously, the British, right? There's also an Israeli one, right? We have to realize this. There's an Israeli lobby.
Well, it's huge.
There's the British lobby is number one.
What is the British lobby called, Webster?
It's called Wall Street. It's called, all these banks.
All right. APAC is called APAC. All right.
Yeah, but the British, they don't need anything like this. The British have it through the Wall Street banking system.
Well, of course, they're tied right to the City of London. I understand.
And remember, the British have an immediate intelligence sharing link from Fort Meade, Maryland.
Did you see the story today that the NSA data, all of it that's gathered, goes directly to Israel first before it comes here? This is a fact.
That would be something new. So I'll have to take a look at that.
I'll send you the story.
The British have had it. But now, a Saudi lobby, for sure. A Chinese lobby, right, to give China most favored nation and all this other stuff. And the problem in the U.S. today is you don't know. And you know why you don't know? Because the rats cabal, Roberts, Alito, Thomas, and Scalia in the Supreme Court, with Citizens United, all that money can come in from foreign countries secretly. And I think this is one of the biggest stories that has not been discussed.
Pours in
that
and
the
out
U.S. Congress is bought and paid for, not just by Koch and Soros, of course, but also by Britain, Israel, Saudi, China, and down the list, right? I don't know, India, on different issues. Oh, the MEK, right? Mujahideen-e-Khalq. They want to get off the terrorists. They were able to assemble an amazing list of people that they obviously bought, probably with Saudi money. So there it is.
All right, well.
And the point is, if you don't roll back that neo-feudalism, you'll go the way of the Holy Roman Empire and or the Polish Commonwealth. In other words, you'll disappear. And that's the problem with Cloven Bundy. That's the threat.
Okay, well, as always, you put up at least a 4-course meal on the table. This is big stuff. I'm going to send you that story. Let me know what you think about it. Thank you, Webster, as always. Fascinating. You take care.
See you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Night. All right, there he goes, the outspoken, ever-spoken Webster Griffin Tarpley.
Move out. And the soldiers are wondering, what are they going to do? Are they going to go back to Washington, to the forts, and take shelter there? Or are they going to do something else? And you have to realize that under every other commander, under the typical McClellan or Burnside or Hooker or many others, they would have one big battle, and then they'd go back and go into winter quarters or go to camp and stay there for 2 or 3 months and refit and everything like that. Because this is not what modern warfare looks like, right? You don't take months off between battles. So there's this amazing moment, which is about 150 years ago, right now, practically to the hour, where what Grant is trying to do is to get from the wilderness battlefield, which he's leaving behind. It's burning, among other things, horrendous scenes. And he's trying to get to Spotsylvania Courthouse, which is an intersection of some roads. And Grant figures if he can get to Spotsylvania Courthouse first, ahead of Lee and the Confederates, he will then be closer than Lee to Richmond. And instead of Grant having to attack Lee, Lee will have to attack Grant, and that would be the end of him, because this is the phase of warfare where the defensive has a tremendous advantage. 400 million eggs, 50,000 tons of beef.
You did a marvelous job on it. It was fascinating.
And that's what it was. And again, if you want to read about that, you can read about that with John Wheeler Bennett, Sir John Wheeler Bennett, one of the main British intelligence historians between the wars. Wheeler Bennett is a key figure in the network that produced Kissinger. So this is highly official.
Yeah,
it's close to the heart of the British establishment. Put it that way. It's not really official. Yeah. And then you can also look at the famous Fritz Fischer, the German historian who, in many ways, the most controversial since 1945, who went back and tried to show an aggressive design on the part of Germany before 1914. And I would not accept what he says about that. I think that part is wrong. But what he has for sure in his book is a wealth of documentation on how the emergence of modern Ukraine was stage managed by the German General Staff. And that means Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg and General Erich Ludendorff. And Ludendorff, of course, is the guy who then launched Hitler. The two of them launched Lenin into Russia, and they also give you Ukraine. So it's a very strange group. We got to have to change gears historically a couple of times tonight, though, because
Okay.
I couldn't let this evening go by, since this is a very important anniversary tonight in terms of the Civil War sesquicentennial, the 150th anniversary, and that is, maybe people remember, in early May 1st, May 2nd of 1864, Ulysses Grant had become the commander of all the Union armies, and he ordered everybody to go forward and attack, and that meant Sherman moving from Chattanooga to Atlanta. It meant poor Nathaniel Banks trying to attack Mobile and some other places he never got anywhere. Yeah. Ben Butler trying to attack Richmond, and Franz Sigel and later Hunter trying to attack in the Shenandoah Valley. And those three little ones didn't work, but the two big ones did. And what we've just had, Monday and Tuesday of this week, were the 150th anniversary of the Battle of the Wilderness. And this was the first clash between Grant and Lee directly, and it took place in this thicket of underbrush and scrubby little...
Okay, here we are in an ever busier and more confused and, shall we say, multi-layered conspiratorial world. And let's not even mention evil. We'll go there another time. Webster Tarpley is with us tonight this first hour. Lots on his table. What's up, Webster? How are you?
Good evening. I wanted to attempt a kind of a historical analysis. I think I can bring together two interesting themes.
Yeah,
one is Cloven Bundy, and the other one is Ukraine and Poland. And places
that's quite
like
a stretch, but you can do it if anybody can. Let me just say that we did talk, you and I don't know if it was last month, it may have been, about the fact that Ukraine, other than the last century, the 20th century, was essentially kind of piecemeal here and there throughout history. It wasn't a solid bedrock country or nation as we know it. We did spend some time on that.
Oh, yes, we did. I think we went through the whole thing.
Yes, we did. You did
I've
a marvelous job.
just sent you that article.
I'm going to repost it. Yeah, I'll put it under your name.
I meant to send it to you before, but I just never got around to it. But this focused my mind.
Watch for it under Webster's name. Metaphysical doubts concerning the existence of modern Ukraine, a 1918 creation of the German General Staff. All right, let's roll.
We went through that, right? We did the 1 million tons of grain, hedges and trees, just south of the Rappahannock, Rapidan rivers, a little bit west of Fredericksburg, Virginia. So it's the Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, Wilderness, and Spotsylvania battlefields. They're all pretty much in the same.
It wasn't a Currier and Ives drawing. Let's put it that way.
Oh no, this was modern warfare, and within about a month, it looks just like World War I on the Western Front. But what you had then was 2 days of battle at Wilderness with heavy casualties, right? 18,000 Union casualties, 12,000 Confederate, so 3-2. But of course, that was not the main point. That at that rate of loss, the Union was going to win the war because Lee had no way to replace these troops, whereas Grant had, huge manpower reserves. Although that was not Grant's strategy at all. He was attempting a war of maneuver, which he did carry through. But after the first 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, there was then a day of quiet. That's today, right? 150 years ago, today, May 7th, 1864. So there's no big fighting on the Wednesday. But then what happens is the Army of the Potomac, Grant, the Union, start to move